2025 NFL Draft starts tomorrow. So in today's video, I want to do my 16th and final 2025 NFL Draft mock draft. And I promise you guys, this one is definitely going to be the best. So make sure you guys stick around and watch the full video. And if you enjoy, hit the like and subscribe button. Let's go ahead and hop right into it. So as you can see, we are on the Pro Football and Sports Network mock draft simulator. If you guys want to find out how to get on this website, I'll have a link in the description below where you guys can check out their fun site. And we are going to begin with the Tennessee Titans at number 1. I do not think I have to explain this pick all that much. The Tennessee Titans are in a situation where they cannot go into 2025 with Will Levis as their starting quarterback. So because they've kind of pigeonholed themselves into a spot here where they have to take a quarterback, I'm going to go ahead and just not overthink it and take Cam Ward. I think on draft night, if anybody not named Cam Ward was taken at number 1, it would be one of the biggest shocks in recent NFL draft history. Do I think Cam Ward is worth the number 1 overall pick? Not particularly. I think he's more worthy of like a top 10 pick, but probably not number 1. But because of the quarterback position, because of the value of the quarterback position and how badly Tennessee needs to have a starting quarterback, I just think Cam Ward is probably the best way available for this team to move forward with. Number 2 is the Cleveland Browns, and I'm obviously going to go ahead and just take Travis Hunter. Travis Hunter has consistently been my number 1 player of the entire draft for the past several months. He kind of fixes 2 different issues for this Browns team, both the receiver position and the cornerback position. For the Browns, I do think he will be a full-time receiver, and I think he's probably more than likely just going to be a situational / third down corner for the Cleveland Browns. I think that's probably the way you use him for this team. They already have a couple of good corners, obviously Denzel Ward. You're hoping that Emerson can get back to form, but I think Travis Hunter could end up becoming like a third down package, or maybe in certain coverages that you want to have him out there in. Maybe Travis Hunter goes out there, but I think he'll likely just be a full-time receiver with some defensive snaps. The New York Giants are in a tough spot here because I don't think Abdul Carter is necessarily their biggest need because they already have a couple of really good defensive linemen. But in my opinion, there is a sizable downgrade after Abdul Carter. I think Abdul is one of maybe 4 true blue chip prospects. Admittedly speaking, I do think this is a trade down spot, but if they do not want to trade down and if they want to just take the best player here, I think you take Abdul Carter and then find a way to get off Kayvon Thibodeau's contract. Next up is the New England Patriots, and I think this is kind of where the draft starts. After the first 3 picks, which we kind of already know who they're going to be, it just kind of depends on what team happens to take the pick. At number 4 is really the first pick that we don't really know too much about. Now, for the sake of this mock draft, I am going to go ahead and take Will Campbell, but I got to be honest with you, I don't feel terribly confident in that pick. The Patriots, with their new ownership, feel like a team that can kind of go in any direction this year. It could be an edge rusher, it could be an Armand Membu, it could even be a Tetairoa McMillan. But I personally think the biggest weakness of this Patriots team is their offensive line. Last year, it was abysmal, and so far this season, at least in the offseason, they haven't really done too much to address the spot besides bringing in Bradbury at center, and of course, you brought in Morgan Moses, but I don't really feel terribly confident in either one of those guys, especially because Moses consistently gets injured. For the Patriots, Will Campbell could step in. I think he's likely to move inside to play guard if need be, but I think he also can play left tackle and just kind of see if he can work there. Regardless of where you put him at, I think Will Campbell will be a fantastic player at the NFL level. Do I think he'll ever be a Pro Bowl, All-Pro guy? Maybe not All-Pro, but I do think he will at some point make some Pro Bowls. Number 5 is the Jacksonville Jaguars, and lately the trendy pick has been Ashton Jeanty, and I'm going to follow the trend. I have been somebody advocating for Jeanty to be considered at number 5 for several months now because I am not a believer in ETN. And this offense feels like it could really use a guy who can set the identity of this team. Ashton Jeanty very well could become the identity for this Trevor Lawrence-led offense in Jacksonville. You also just want to help your young quarterback who lately hasn't really been incredible these past few years. You want to help him out, go out there and get him a dynamic running back like Ashton Jeanty behind an offensive line that isn't terrible, but also could still use some work, I think, maybe later in the draft. I think Jeanty just makes the most sense. Yes, you can go Mason Graham, but I think Mason Graham is probably not worthy of a top 5 pick. We'll get to him here in a little bit. If I was to take anybody not named Ashton Jeanty for the Jaguars, it would probably be either Armand Membu or Tetairoa McMillan. Moving on to number 6, because Ashton Jeanty is now off the board, this now does kind of put a question mark as to what the Raiders would actually do in this situation. I think there's a couple players that I definitely would consider here. Obviously, Mason Graham next to Christian Wilkins would be pretty nice. This team also desperately could use a top-tier corner, so like a Will Johnson potentially is in play here. But in this situation, I think that they're going to likely move DJ Glaze either to more of a swing tackle role or inside to play guard, and they're going to take Armand Membu to play their right tackle spot. This is a Raiders offensive line that I don't think is particularly too bad, but it does seem like Raiders fans would like to find some upgrades there. Armand Bembou steps in day one, can play right guard, right tackle for this team, wherever you really need him to fit in. And I think Armand Bembou could be a very successful guy. He moves incredibly well for his size, well-built, strong player. So just think the Raiders could really use a guy like that on this roster. Number 7 is the New York Jets, and this is a team that if I was taking the pick, I would be calling up Tetairoa McMillan in like a heartbeat. But it does feel like this Jets team doesn't have too much interest in Tet, which I find to be a little bit weird. But I will say they could probably draft a receiver like a Alec Ayomaner or Jaden Higgins in round 2, and I think it could also get the job done. For sake of argument, though, I will go ahead and just take Tyler Warren. He steps in day one, immediately becomes an impactful player on this offense. I talked about Ashton Jeanty setting an identity for that Jaguars team. I kind of feel like Tyler Warren could also assist this Jets team in finding out what their identity is. If Armand Bembou was available here, I would definitely have considered him as well, but he's off the board. And I kind of just feel like you're going to take either one of Warren, Bembou, or maybe Mason Graham because he's here. But I just think that Tyler Warren fixes a bigger need offensively. And frankly, I think this Jets team just needs to find pieces to surround Justin Fields with. Yes, you have Garrett Wilson, you have Breece Hall, but what do you have outside of it? Really nothing particularly good. Tyler Warren steps in, fixes a major issue on this team. I think he's an awesome player that you can use in multiple ways, can be a great reliable weapon for Justin Fields to get the ball off to. I think Tyler Warren is Brock Bowers. No, he's not. But I do think he is a very quality tight end that will be top 10 in the league for a while. All right, Jaguars are at 8, and even though I don't necessarily love the player that I'm going to take here, I'm going to go ahead and just take Jalen Walker because this does feel like this is what this team is going to do. Now, admittedly speaking, I have heard many reports that the Carolina Panthers are interested in trading down, and frankly, I think that is a very smart tactic for them to do. The question would then become what team is going to trade up to number 8 where Carolina can trade down with. So I don't know who that could be. Maybe San Francisco for Mason Graham, maybe a team like Dallas for Ted or Miami for Will Johnson, so on and so forth. But if they're forced to stay and pick here at 8, I do think Jalen Walker is the pick. Now, Walker's an interesting player because I don't think he is a linebacker, but I also don't see him being a full-time edge rusher. He's one of the weird, unique, full-on positionless players that you just have to find a way to scheme up within your defense. And I think for Carolina, they have some level of experience with Frankie Louvu from last couple years. But I think for Jalen Walker, the best way to use him is just by having him be an absolute disruptor on the defensive line or within the front 7. I think Walker can play off the edge. I also do believe he can play as an off-ball linebacker role wherever you really want to use him at. Just put him in a position where he can cause havoc and he will get the job done. I don't necessarily think they should just stick him out at edge and just say, hey, sink or swim here, nor do I think they should do that as an off-ball linebacker. I kind of think you have to find a way to use his skill set in a unique way we haven't quite seen from a typical NFL team. So what I would do with Jalen Walker is I would just have him out there as an off-ball linebacker, blitz him 30% of the downs and have fun with that, see if he can put some pressure on the quarterback, and also trust that his instincts will get him through a game as an off-ball linebacker. So however they decide to use him, Carolina's getting the ultimate weapon and a guy that so many NFL analysts are extremely high on, and frankly, I can kind of see why. Number 9 is the New Orleans Saints here, and while Mason Graham is available, I'm going to bet that they're still having some faith in Brian Bresee. I still believe the offensive line could use some work, so I'm going to go ahead and just take Kelvin Banks Jr. He is my offensive tackle 1 in this year's draft class. That's because I think Will Campbell is a guard. If we're including Will Campbell, then Banks would be my number 2 tackle in this year's class. I just think Banks is unbelievably solid. And for the Saints team that is wanting to get younger and wants to build the trenches in a better way, what better way to do that than by drafting back-to-back offensive tackles in the draft? For sake of argument, do I think he starts at tackle immediately? I don't know. I think best case scenario, you start him at guard for a year, figure out your offensive line in 2026. I do think that you can move Fuanga back to right tackle and then move Banks into left tackle. However you want to work this offensive line, you can work it however you want to do so. I just think Banks kind of finishes up this younger offensive line and just helps this Saints team move past this dumb Derek Carr era, because obviously Derek Carr probably won't play next year. And then I think in 2026, you go all in for a quarterback. I don't know, maybe Arch Manning. All right, at number 10 is the Chicago Bears, and I cannot let Mason Graham fall any farther than this. Mason Graham is a unique player with a lot of varying opinions of him. For myself, I think that Mason Graham is a good player, and I think he should be drafted top 15, and I think he will get drafted top 15. Do I think Mason Graham is a quote-unquote blue chip prospect? No. Because to me, a blue chip prospect is somebody who can instantly step into a team and be a crazy, dynamic difference maker who can make Pro Bowls and All Pros. I don't know if I'm getting that from Mason Graham. But what I am getting from Mason Graham is a very high floor, and pretty solid ceiling player, where I know instantly when I draft Mason Graham, I'm getting a quality starting defensive tackle with a pretty good size ceiling to be a Pro Bowl caliber nose tackle. He's good against the run. He's a constant disruptor. I think he has some pass rush nuance to him that he still can unlock. But once he does unlock that, I think that he could be kind of a 3-down guy. He's also just somebody I'm willing to kind of bet on. He's got that good personality to him. He has that good character and desire to be great. And so because that, I have a feeling he's going to be a fantastic player. And for me, this draft is kind of full of a couple hit or miss players. And if I want to just make sure I get a good quality player, if I'm the Chicago Bears, even if I don't have the craziest need as a defensive tackle, I kind of just think you just take best player here and just think that he's going to be a quality player for your team for quite some time. Let's not forget, this Bears team did pass on Jalen Carter, and it kind of bit them in the butt. You take Mason Graham here, and that kind of does fix that issue you had from a few years ago. So I think Mason Graham instantly steps into the Chicago Bears, who are probably trying to make a playoff push this upcoming season, helps that defensive line, could be a great against the run, could be good against the pass. And man, this Bears team is just putting together a nice team. I think in round 2, you can address running back as well as maybe another edge rusher, maybe tackle as well. But man, Mason Graham would be fun next to what they already have on the defensive line. All right, San Francisco, they need help so desperately badly on the defensive line. I would not be shocked that if Mason Graham does fall to, let's say, below 8, if San Francisco tries to move up 1 or 2 spots to go ahead and secure Mason Graham, he would be an absolute star on this defensive line. But I'm going to go ahead and just move off of it. I have 2 players who I am heavily considering here for San Francisco, and that is Mike Green. And if I go down the board here, Walter Nolan. I love Walter Nolan. I think he is an insanely high ceiling player, but I think they could really use a pass rush element immediately. Walter Nolan is a player who I think needs a little bit of development, whereas I think Mike Green steps in day 1 and instantly puts up a incredible pass rushing duo with Nick Bosa. I wouldn't be shocked by no means if Mike Green goes out there and gets 7+ sacks in his rookie season. My question for him is, how does he look against the run, especially against NFL level offensive linemen? Just because he's a little bit smaller, and I just don't know if he has the frame to hold up against a Trent Williams, obviously his teammate, or I guess a better example would be like, I don't know, a Penei Sewell or somebody like that. I just don't know how he can hold up against those guys. But if you put the right pieces around him, I do think San Francisco desperately needs to address more defensive line later in the draft. I think Mike Green could be a really solid piece to put next to Nick Bosa to just help create havoc against the opposing quarterback. And again, San Francisco has a lot of work to still be done. I think Mike Green fixes some of those issues though. All right, Dallas at 12. This might be like best case scenario for Dallas. Like, I know that the top tackles are off the board, which Dallas is definitely going to consider, but with the way the board fell here, you got all the receivers that you could possibly take. You could even go corner like Will Johnson or Jahdae Barron. Man, the board fell really nicely here for them, but I'm not going to overthink it. To me, Tetairoa McMillan on the Dallas Cowboys is almost as perfect of a fit as it actually gets. The reports on Tet is so interesting because sometimes I see reports that say he's going to go within the top 8. And then I see other reports and other mock drafts where he's falling all the way to the 20s. And to me, I just think if Dallas is in a situation where Tet falls right into their lap, you do not overthink it. I have heard that Dallas is also trying to trade down, but in a situation where Tet is at pick 12, I don't think you overthink it. It's kind of like the CeeDee Lamb pick from, what was it, I think 2020, where they didn't really need a receiver because they had Michael Gallup and Amari Cooper. But when a superstar like CeeDee Lamb falls into your lap, you just don't overthink it. You just take the guy. And even though I don't think Tet is CeeDee Lamb level, I do think that he is one of, if not the best starting receivers in the 2025 NFL draft. So if I am the Dallas Cowboys, I could pair up a, 6'5", 200+ pound receiver opposite of CeeDee Lamb. And while his skill set isn't that of a typical super tall and lanky receiver, I think his skill set also does work really nicely with CeeDee Lamb. Lamb can do stuff down the field. Lamb can do stuff underneath. Tet can do a lot of things in the intermediate while also being able to go deep occasionally. So, and I just think in general, Dallas with Dak Prescott would love to have a big body weapon because they don't really have that right now outside of like Jake Ferguson, who even then isn't really the biggest tight end in the world. They really lack size on the outside. Tet McMillan fixes that issue instantly. All right, the Miami Dolphins are on the board here, and if Will Johnson was a clear-cut, easy-to-pick prospect, he would be the pick here, but man, he is just a bizarre player. Like, he is truly just bizarre because his 2023 film was so good, then his 2024 film was just so inconsistent, and everything this offseason has pointed red flag after red flag after red flag, and so he's probably going to fall down the board a little bit, And with the way the board goes, I think defensive tackle might be a serious need for this Dolphins team. Not only do they lack a serious starter in the defensive tackle room, but they just lack depth. I think they only have like 3 signed defensive tackles, and I'm sorry, you cannot go into 2025 with less than 5. I think, frankly, you might need 6 to 5, and I think Walter Nolan, to me, is the best available defensive tackle in this class. Now, I'll say this. I think Derek Harmon and I also think Kenneth Grant have a higher floor than Walter Nolan. But I think Walter Nolan has a much higher ceiling than those guys, even though I think Kenneth Grant has a very high ceiling too. I just think Walter Nolan's ceiling is that of a Jalen Carter-like player, where you're getting somebody who every year will get better, every year will unlock new tools to work with, and once they reach their full potential, man, this dude is just going to be a nasty player for this Miami Dolphins team. You already have some really good edge rushers. You drafted one last year. You've already had some established guys. But after you lost Christian Wilkins, that interior defensive line room has been kind of weak. And I think Walter Nolan steps in immediately and fixes that issue. I know you could say, well, why don't you just take one in round 2? You could, but I feel much better taking a guy like Walter Nolan with a very high ceiling, more so than taking, let's say, like an Alfred Collins in round 2, who sure will be a good player, but never will be a true difference maker. I also do want to say I did consider Malachi Starks here, but I think there's a couple really good safeties in round 2 and 3 that you can take and have a similar result as they would if they had taken Malachi Starks. So I'm going to go ahead and just take Walter Nolan. I also would have considered tackle there, but the top 3 tackles are off the board, and I don't want to reach on a Gray Zabel or a Josh Connerly. And with Josh Simmons' injury, it's just kind of a big question mark. All right, the Colts at number 14. Unfortunately, Tyler Warren doesn't fall to them there, but that is okay because you end up taking a really good player here. And let me scroll down here, Jahad Campbell. You lose EJ Speed. Your linebacking core has kind of lacked the depth it had the past couple years. Obviously, with some injuries there and just guys leaving, the team has kind of needed a difference-making linebacker for quite some time. Jahad Campbell is one of my favorite players in this draft class. If you guys follow my podcast, I have Jahad Campbell as a top 10 player in this class. I think Jahad Campbell is such a fun and interesting prospect. Yes, there are some injury concerns from, I believe, the offseason. He has some sort of injury that we have to worry about. But if he is healthy, he puts on a Colts uniform immediately and is such an impactful player. I think he is a traditional off-ball linebacker, but I think you can put him off the edge and see if he has some juice there, kind of like what Dallas did with Micah. Not saying he'll become Micah, but Dallas was in a situation where they had injuries on the edge rushing room, and so they said, all right, screw it. Let's see if Micah can make plays there. We all know how that kind of worked out. I think Jahad Campbell maybe could do something similar where he's a true off-ball linebacker, and then at some point, maybe injuries pile up, and they say, all right, Jahad, can you go out there and get us a sack or two? And I think he could. But even as a traditional inside linebacker, I still think he has some development to do because he was an edge rusher in high school and moved over to linebacker and has only played the position for a couple years now, so he still has room to grow. But what I get is a very well-sized, very good athlete player that just can be a disruptor. I think he has some flaws in coverage, but I think that there has been signs that he is going to be a really solid coverage player. I think he reads offenses quite well. He doesn't fall for play action or RPOs too much. And when he does, he is able to use his athleticism and size to typically get back into the play. Again, he's not a finished product. He has mistakes on film, but if he can become that more clean prospect we think he can become, man, I think the Colts would be getting an awesome player to add to their defense. All right, 15, the Atlanta Falcons are on the board here, and I talked about it earlier with Mason Graham. I just think in this draft, you need to get good football players, dudes who can just simply play. And for the Atlanta Falcons, sure, I could go Shamar Stewart, but Shamar is such a massive question mark that I don't know if he's going to be good or bad. Same thing with a lot of these defensive linemen still on the board. Yes, I know they need pass rushing help so badly, but I'm not willing to take these risks here at pick 15. I need to hit immediately. I need a good player. And to me, Jahdae Barron is just an incredibly good player. You could play him opposite of AJ Terrell. He can play as a nickel. He can play as a safety. Wherever this Falcons team wants to put him at, Jahdae Barron can play any of those positions and be incredibly good at them. No, can he be a lockdown CB1? Probably not. But that's why you have AJ freaking Terrell. You put him opposite of him, where Mike Hughes is at, I think Jahdae would be fantastic. If you want to put him as a nickel, where D. Alfred's at, I think he'd be incredible. You want to put him at safety, I think he can get the job done. So wherever this Falcons team wants to move Jahdae, I think he instantly steps in. I think he is a high culture guy. He will step in, be a leader on this defense as time does go on. And again, you just want to hit at the 15th overall pick. You want a good player. I know Jahdae Barron will step in and be a good player. Whereas some of these names on the board here, I cannot guarantee they're going to be good players. I can with Jahdae Barron, so I don't think you overthink it if you're the Atlanta Falcons. I know you need a pass rusher, but I think you can find one on day 2. Maybe if somebody drops, you might end up trading up to find an edge rusher. Not to mention, they've already invested so much these past few drafts. I kind of think the Falcons might be in a spot where they say, let's let these guys develop and get more run next year. But again, I still think they need to do some work there, just probably in rounds 2 or 3 at this stage. All right, the Arizona Cardinals, I'm not going to switch up on this pick. I've been doing this pick for quite some time. I'm just going to go ahead and just take Kenneth Grant. Kenneth Grant, to me, is a very high ceiling player. He also gives you a very solid floor. Like, you're getting a guy in Kenneth Grant who, I'll be honest with you, I've heard some scouts say that he might be the best defensive tackle at Michigan. Like, I've heard genuine coaches say that at Michigan, they thought Kenneth Grant was going to be a better player than Mason Graham. And he's ended up becoming a first-round pick, and I think, frankly, he has that ceiling to be a very good player. He's a massive individual who just is a bit of a raw player. He's a kind of a wild card guy where he'll go out there and make some crazy plays, and he'll just be an absolute disruptor. And then he'll go out there and have a play that just is kind of bizarre. He's kind of an inconsistent player. But man, Arizona is the perfect situation for him. Dalvin Tomlinson, Calais Campbell, 2 veterans of the game who have been awesome for several years. You put Kenneth Grant in that defensive tackle room, and I think Kenneth Grant can develop so nicely there, mature as well, and just put together a really nice rookie season. And then in the future, once those guys depart, Kenneth Grant steps in and is immediately one of the best players on that defensive line. I could have went Will Johnson. I definitely would have considered it, but there's just a lot of question marks surrounding him. And again, back to my mantra, take good players. If there's question marks with a prospect, just move down the board to a player that you know is going to be good. I know Kenneth Grant should be a good player. I don't know what Will Johnson looks like, so I'm going to go ahead and just take Kenneth Grant. All right, Cincinnati's on the board here, and I think this team has to go with something on the defense. As much as I will consider an offensive guard here, like a Josh Simmons, who I think is a tackle, but could maybe move to guard. Gray Zabel, Josh Carney, I'm definitely considering those guys. But man, this defense was so bad last year. So bad. And I don't think that you can just continue to just close your eyes and pretend it sucks. Like, no, it sucks. And what really sucks is that their defensive line sucks. And how can you fix that? By getting a good player with a really high ceiling. I'm going to go with Mykel Williams. Admittedly speaking, I am not the biggest fan of Mykel as we sit right now. But what I can tell you about him is that I think he's going to be a high floor and decent size ceiling guy. I don't think Mykel was ever going to be an all-pro. I don't think he's ever going to be a home run hit at 17. But what I do think Mykel will be is a good run defender with maybe some pass rush juice. I think at his best, you're getting a high-level run defender who could also be a solid pass rusher who gets you 6, 7, 8 sacks a season. But at his worst, I think Mykel is a good run defender who's just kind of more of a first down, second down guy because he doesn't give you much as a pass rusher. So again, that is a quality rotational player that you will end up taking. Is it the flashiest pick? No, it's not a home run hit, but it will end up working. And I kind of think his skill set kind of would work nicely with Trey Hendrickson. Now, I'm doing this move with the assumption that Trey Hendrickson does come back. If Trey is gone, I'm probably going for the home run hit in Shamar Stewart. But because I think they'll bring back Trey Hendrickson, because they should, I'm willing to take the bet on Mykel, who is a great run defender. And then, of course, you have Trey Hendrickson, who's your pass rush guru. And hopefully Mykel, who, by the way, is still only 20 years of age, dealt with an injury last year and still had 6 sacks. So it's not like he's inept as a pass rusher. There's just a lot he has to learn. And I think he might learn a thing or two from Trey Hendrickson and become a really solid player for this Bengals team. By the way, Mykel is somebody who I think will go early on day 1. I don't think there's a chance he falls to day 2. All right, Seattle's on the board here. And even though I don't think this is going to be the pick because this Seattle team with their front office, they just don't ever want to seem to take top tier guards or anything like that. But I'm taking Gray Zabel. He to me is just a nasty, physical, just plug and play player. You can play him at center, you can play him at guard, you can play him at tackle. And I just know I'm getting somebody who is just so similar to like Graham Barton from last year. And Graham Barton ended up being a pretty solid pick for the Buccaneers, and they feel pretty good about him for the future. That's kind of what I see in Gray Zabel, where no, I don't think it's a home run hit, and we're going to be talking about this pick as one of the best picks of all time. But damn, we got a really good player for 10 plus years who might make an all-pro here or there, or a Pro Bowl maybe. And I just think that's what Seattle needs. That offense, man, it has some pieces. I like the moves they made for Cooper Kupp and adding Sam Darnold. I liked the moves, but man, that offensive line still sucks, and I think they need another receiver too. I think the hope for Seattle is that the defense takes a big step forward next year, which definitely is possible. And if it does end up happening, then you just need the offense to get the job done. And I think Gray's able, wherever you put him at, guard, tackle, center, will get the job done. So I think it's just the right pick for Seattle. It's also the pick that I've done quite frequently lately. All right, Tampa Bay with their 3-4 defense is going to go ahead and take a 3-4 edge rusher here in Donovan Ezuraku. I do think that Donovan is kind of a scheme-dependent guy. Not saying he couldn't succeed in a 4-3 where he has to put his hand in the dirt, but I think he's better suited in more of that outside linebacker role where he can be in a 2-point stance, just come off the edge with a little bit more space to operate. Kind of think that's what Donovan might be a little bit better suited at. Solid athlete. Wouldn't say he's a fantastic athlete, but just a solid athlete with a variety of pass rush moves, really good bend around the corner. And this is a Buccaneers team that is pretty complete as a roster, but they could just use a premier edge rusher. There's maybe some linebacking help as well. Of course, John Campbell's off the board, who he would have been the pick here at 19 if he was available, but he is off the board. Donovan Ezuraku is, to me, a really safe option. I love Donovan. I think he's a good player, and I think he fits this Buccaneers team quite nicely. All right, at number 20 is the Denver Broncos, and typically I have this team taking Amaran Hampton, but I think I'm going to pass on him here because a guy in Matthew Golden fell right into their laps. There was some quote-unquote rumors of them shopping Courtland Sutton. I don't know how real those are or if they're fake. I don't know. Kind of think they'd be a little silly to do so. But either way, whether he's on the roster or not, you still need a second option next to him. Yes, you have guys like Troy Franklin, Marvin Mims, Von Vele, but I think those guys are all like wide receiver 3/4s. And so I think this team really could use a number 2 option. And because they brought in Evan Ingram, I'm also not going to consider Colston Loveland. So I'm taking Matthew Golden. Matthew Golden, to me, is a very unique player because he came on late for Texas last year. But man, this dude just has sure hands. His routes are really solid. He's a smooth runner. He can create separation, though it's a little inconsistent. I think you put him out there with Bo Nix, who just had a really good rookie season. I just think that would continue to elevate this offense. And I think round 2, you probably take a running back like a Travion Henderson if he falls to you. All right, Pittsburgh's in a situation where I think they have to go quarterback. I like Shador. I think Shador gets a lot of criticism from fans, and some of it is warranted, some of it is not. I think he's a very fundamentally sound quarterback that I know I'm going to get a good quarterback and likely not a bust. Yes, he needs to learn how to work in the system of the offense, how to operate at quicker level, not hold onto the ball, get through his reads faster. I understand that. But I think for a team like Pittsburgh where, man, I don't even know who their starting quarterback is. Is it Mason Rudolph at this point? Will it be Aaron Rodgers? I don't know. I don't think Pittsburgh, though, should operate with the mindset that they already have the quarterback position figured out. And this is a Pittsburgh team, by the way, that cannot afford to go into the season with bad quarterback play because they're going to be a bad team next year. And this team is ready to win now. Is this an ideal situation? Of course not. Of course, I'd rather have this team take somebody else. But they have put themselves in the situation where they don't have a quarterback. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to wait till round 2 and pray to God that Jalen Milroe falls to me. Frankly, because one, I don't think Jalen's a good player. Well, let me rephrase that. I don't think he's a good quarterback right now to help this team win now. But also, like, it's probably not going to happen. You're going to end up being around 2 and your quarterback options are Will Howard or Tyler Shock. And I'm not rocking with that in 2025. That's just not going to work for me. You have to win now. I think Shador gives his team the best chance to do so. And even if Rodgers does come, great. Shador can sit on the bench for a year, learn from a freaking Hall of Famer, and probably end up being a better quarterback because of it. So to me, it puts Shador in a good situation. He has some good pieces around him, a good defense, some good receivers, a coaching staff that's been stable. I just think it's the right pick. I think it's the pick I kind of have to do at this stage. All right, the LA Chargers are up at 22, and I'm not going to overthink it. They could really use some help in the tight end room. Admittedly speaking, they do have some guys like Will Dissly. I believe they also signed Conklin too. But I think that you just want to get the highest level player here. Obviously, Michigan connection's also nice there. To be honest with you, Colston Loveland isn't much of like your prototypical tight end. So even though they did sign some guys and already have some pieces in that room, I kind of view Colston as like a big receiving threat. And so because you already have some bigger tight ends that can do a bit more of the blocking stuff, you already can run 12 personnel with your tight ends already on the roster. But if you bring in Colston Loveland, I do think he can fit in quite nicely. I also don't want to sit here and say that Colston is inept at blocking. I just think as an inline blocker, he's going to struggle. But on things like swing passes, screens, anything like that, I do think Colston Loveland in space can be a good blocking tight end, which is probably what they'll likely use him as. It's also just the best fit for Colston because, I mean, Harbaugh was a Michigan guy and Colston Loveland's a Michigan guy. So it just kind of works naturally for both these guys. I think this puts the best player in the best situation that's still on the board here. So I just think it makes a lot of sense. All right, the Packers are going to take Will Johnson. I think Will Johnson is a massive question mark. I think if we get 2023 Will, you're getting a great player. But you get 2024 Will, and so far the offseason Will, it's not looking very good. There was some reports that came out that he ran a 40, and it was a very slow 40, and that's a massive question mark. Now, granted, I think it was just a warm-up run, and maybe he was injured, but it's still a question mark. It's still very concerning. Green Bay, though, is a team where they already have a roster that's ready to compete. They just need a couple pieces on both offense and defense. If Will Johnson does pan out, he can be your Jair Alexander replacement and just be such a massive upgrade for that secondary, even if Jair does stay, because this team could also use a cornerback too. But worst case scenario, I think this could end up being a wasted pick because Will Johnson might have the potential to be really bad. Me personally, I think that it's going to work out. And for Green Bay that really needs a starting corner, I think Will Johnson's just the right play here. He fell into your laps. Sometimes you just don't have to overthink it. All right, 24, the Minnesota Vikings. Speaking of not overthinking things, somebody in Malachi Starks fell right into their lap. And hey, don't overthink it. Malachi Starks, yes, he plays a position that you can find later in the draft, but he's such a versatile piece that can play strong safety, free safety. I even think he can play nickel or even maybe outside corner in a pinch. And for this Minnesota team that frankly has a lot of question marks within their secondary, especially with Harrison Smith being as old as he is, I think Malachi Starks just steps in there day one, can become an impactful player as a rotational starter, and then after the season becomes your full-time go-to superstar safety. Malachi Starks, to me, is a top 10 player that likely will fall out of the top 15 just because he plays safety. And for Minnesota, to me, it's just a no-brainer pick. Just take the good player that's going to be a great guy and can fit your needs massively. So I just think it makes a lot of sense. All right, 25, the Houston Texans, they have done a decent job of shoring up the offensive line, but there's still a lot of question marks there, especially with some of these older guys who I just have some question marks about their durability. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and take Josh Simmons. Does he start immediately? I don't know. He might. A healthy Josh Simmons, to me, goes top 15, though. It just kind of comes down to he has some character concerns, which I'm a little bit worried about for Houston because they just got rid of Laremy Tunsil because of some character issues. So hopefully Josh Simmons can get that figured out and fit into that team. And I mean, hopefully with surrounding him with CJ Stroud will get him back on the right track. But man, I mean, a healthy Josh Simmons is one of the best tackles in this class. It just kind of comes down to, is he healthy? What does the character look like? If those things check out, I think Houston would be silly to not make this pick. Again, does he start immediately? I don't know because they have some guys there. But if you want to put the best 5 offensive linemen on the field, I think Josh Simmons would be that, of course, if he is healthy. And then down the road, if he doesn't start immediately, he'll start next year. So it all kind of just works out. 26, the LA Rams. Now, I want to throw a bit of a curveball here and just kind of let you guys know what I'm thinking. I'm going to take Trey Amos here. However, if medicals check out for Benjamin Morrison, and if everything is clean, I know he just had a workout, but if the NFL thinks he is good to go and ready to play game 1 at the same level that he was at pre-injury, I'm taking Benjamin Morrison here. But I don't have that information, so I'm going to go ahead and just stick with Trey Amos here. I think Trey Amos likely is going to be your cornerback 2, but also has the potential to be a cornerback 1. Kind of a press man corner, or let me rephrase that, more of a press corner who has played a lot of cover 3. This Rams team also does a lot of cover 3 stuff as well. I think Trey Amos is a solid fit. I do think that he isn't an impact player in that cornerback 1 role immediately, but if he develops nicely as time does go on, he could end up being your true cornerback 1, which is what I think this Rams team really needs. Kind of would like to see Jalen Ramsey here too, by the way. I also think this Rams team desperately needs linebacking help, but I'm not going to go ahead and take a Carson or a Barrett or even a Demetrius Knight this early. It just feels a little bit early for me, so I'll push that down the board for that team. All right, Baltimore's here, and I think this team could really use some pass rush juice, especially like young pass rushing juice, because Kyle Van Noy is just going to continue to get older and older. I like Nick Scorton a lot. I don't know if he's the best 3-4 fit, though. I think he's a bit more of a true 4-3 edge. I'm going to go with James Pierce Jr. Admittedly speaking, I'm not the biggest James Pierce Jr. guy. I just am not. I've been consistently saying that I'm not a James guy. With that said, the ceiling is very high, especially as a pass rusher. I don't think the floor is terribly low either. I think there's a pretty good floor there. For Baltimore, a team that has veteran guys, they can take in a guy who maybe has had some character concerns. They can get him straight. Not worried about that. You got a legit coaching staff that knows what they're doing, some veterans on the defense. Worst case scenario, in his rookie season, he doesn't play much. But I think as time does go on, James Pierce will end up being somebody who could be a part of that rotational edge rushing room and probably be a 5+ sack per season guy. I feel pretty confident, though, that he will be better than that and could be a premier pass rusher for this team. So, worst case scenario, you get 5+ sacks. Best case scenario, you're getting 8 to 10+ sacks. All right, Detroit also could use some help in the edge rushing room. This team does run a bit more of a traditional 4-3, so I'm not going to overthink it. Nick Scoring to me is one of the best players in this draft class. He's such an underrated piece that I guess people don't really pay too much attention to because Texas A&M didn't really put him in the best situation to succeed. With that said, he's a young player with a lot of room to grow, well-sized individual. He kind of fits that Detroit mold a bit better than what a James Pierce Jr. might have looked like. If he can return to form to what he looked like with Purdue, Detroit is getting, in my opinion, a really good player who can instantly be an impactful player immediately. He's got size that can put him well against the run. I think he has some pass rush juice. I just kind of think it gives you the best of both worlds. All right, Washington, they also need defensive line. Unfortunately, a little bit of a run here these past 2 picks has kind of made it a bit harder to take one of the top edge rushers. But I'm just going to go ahead and take Shamar Stewart. Again, I'm not the biggest guy on Shamar Stewart, especially because I think he is just such a massive question mark. But if there was a team in this draft class that should be willing to take an attempt at a home run hit, it might be Washington, because this is a team that, let's be honest, and I don't mean this to disrespect any Washington fans or any Washington players, the team probably overperformed what their talent level is, especially like Jaden Daniels kind of carried this defense. The defense was not very good last year. It had some good pieces, it had some good games, but in general, it wasn't a particularly great defense. So I think they kind of have to swing for the fences here. And Shamar Stewart is that swing. I don't know what he looks like. I think he can very well end up being an awesome player, but he also can end up being a really bad player. We're talking about the ultimate question mark. I do think, though, in a Dan Quinn defense, he could develop quite nicely. He's a big individual, really awesome athlete with good twitch, good bend. It just kind of comes down to, can he turn what he's doing now into statistics? Can he turn a good disruption play into a sack? Can he get pressure on a quarterback consistently? And can he be a 3-down guy? All those question marks he's going to have to answer. But if there is a guy late in this draft that I think has superstar potential, it is Shamar Stewart, and I think they should at least consider him. All right, Buffalo's going to go ahead and just stick with the defensive line here. They could really use a disruptor up the middle who can be dominant against the run and be a long-term play next to what they already have. I think Derek Harmon makes a lot of sense. He's good against the run. He's a big individual, but he can also be a disruptor and create havoc on a quarterback. This is a Bills team that already has some pieces on their defensive line, but I mean, you saw what the Eagles did to Patrick Mahomes. I think the Bills would be wise to develop a pass rushing unit that can come at Patrick Mahomes in waves. Because let's be honest, the Bills are not competing against the AFC. They're competing against the Kansas City Chiefs. If they want to make it to a Super Bowl, they have to get to the quarterback. I think Derek Harmon is a good step forward to getting to the quarterback, aka getting to Patrick Mahomes. All right, the Chiefs are on the board here, and man, they have a present wrapped up at their doorstep in Amarian Hampton. Don't get me wrong. I know this team has other issues. I fully understand that. They could use an edge rusher. They could use interior defensive line depth. Hell, they could use a safety like Nick Imanwari. Hell, they could even go receiver for Emeka Egbuka. I fully understand that. But Amarian Hampton, to me, is the best player on the board. I am not a Nick Imanwari fan at all. I know a lot of people would love Nick Imanwari to be the pick here, especially because you lose Justin Reed. But no, I'm not a fan of him. While I like Josh Connerly, I think you have to put some faith in Jalen Moore and some faith into the young guys you drafted last year. And man, when this Chiefs team lost Isaiah Pacheco, they just lost a step on the offensive side of things. It just wasn't clean like it was previously. Amarian Hampton steps in day one, is an impactful player immediately. And just, my God, Amarian Hampton with Patrick Mahomes would be nasty. Yes, maybe you want to bank on Pacheco coming back from his injury and being his normal self, but this is a Chiefs team that wants to win championships. They're at their best when they can run an effective play action. They're at their best when they can run the ball effectively. Yes, I know you lost Joe Thuney and you want to replace him, but I think you have to bank on who you drafted last year and who you did in the offseason. So I think Amarian Hampton, to me, the best player fell down the board, and I just think you consider him. And lastly, the Philadelphia Eagles. I know a lot of Eagles fans are going to want Nick Imanwari, maybe even Tyler Booker, but I'm not taking either one of these guys because somebody named Emeka Egbuka just fell right into their laps. Emeka Egbuka, to me, is such a good player. And yes, I understand, why would you take this pick? They have Devontae Smith. They have A.J. Brown. For starters, there's been a lot of rumors about A.J. Brown potentially not being on the team in the long haul. Throwing that out there. So even if A.J. Brown does leave, you have Devontae Smith and Emeka Egbuka, and you feel really good about it. But man, you want to put together an unstoppable offense. Imagine an offense with 3 incredible receivers that all can do unique things. A.J. Brown can win downfield. Devontae Smith can win in the intermediate. Emeka Egbuka can win underneath and also in the intermediate. I also think AJ plays on the outside. Smitty can play on the outside and on the inside. Emeka can also play on the inside and on the outside. How are you going to stop this team when you have 3 incredible wide receiver 1 level receivers to go along with a dual threat quarterback like Jalen Hurts? Oh, and Saquon freaking Barkley. Oh, and your offensive line's pretty good too. You just can't. Sure, I know the defense has some work to be done, but they kind of addressed some of their issues with like an Azeez Ojulari and so on and so forth. Not to mention, this is an Eagles team that historically has been really good at drafting edge rushers later in the draft. So they might be in a situation where they could just take best player that falls into their laps at 32, and then in future draft picks in this year's draft, you take a tackle, you take an edge rusher, you take a corner, and you let them develop for a few years, and then those guys become your starters. Not to mention, they've invested so much these past few years to replace the guys they were eventually going to lose. Emeka Egbuka might be that kind of same case there, where you might have to lose AJ Brown because of financial reasons, and then cool, Devontae Smith and Emeka Egbuka is a great 1-2 punch in that receiving room. Just think this pick makes a lot of sense for the Philadelphia Eagles. I know it's not their biggest need, but it does address a position of somewhat need while just continuing to do what the Eagles consistently do, which is just take the best player that falls right into their lap, and they do it again here at 32. So as you can see, this is my full final first round mock draft. You guys let me know in the comment section below what picks you agree with or disagree with. And again, shout out to the website here. I'll have it in the description below. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit the like and subscribe button. Love you guys. Peace.